Hi everyone, my name is Ngọc and now I will talk about some key concepts about translation testing. So there are three different concepts of testing is when to test the translation, why to test it, and who should test the translation. And first I want to talk about when to test the translation. Testing should be early in the project after the first section, episode, or chapter is completed. So if early materials are tested, it will give feedback to the translator, which will point out the weaknesses in this translation or the otherwise. And the translation should be checked section by section, and it will need a final revision entirely again after it's completed. So why we should testing a translation? There are three main reasons for testing a translation. That it needs to be accuracy, clarity, and naturalness in the translation. The purpose of the test is to check whether a translation that is faithful to the source text message and that is natural sounding in the text language. Sometimes it might be a mistake are made in the analysis of the source text or in the transfer process and a different meaning results. So the only way to check for clarity is to test it with a person who are not familiar with the source text and ask questions which will show what they understand, what they can get from the translation, or what they don't or they haven't understand about it. The translator doesn't want his translation to sound strange or too foreign to the listener or to the readers. He wants this to sound natural as it was an original composition in the receptor language. So the next question we like to have is who should test the translation? The translation will be of better quality if several people are involved in testing and it's ideal for a second person to review the translation, uh, except for the translator himself will need to be responsible for what are called subjects and also do the comprehension testing by comparing his translation with text in a receptor language. Having people read the translation is called naturalness checking, feel how his translation can be, how smooth it is. If a translation consultant can train the translator in how to do other kinds of testing and help with many questions that might come up in the process of the translation. Testers and reviewers are also needed. They are people who are willing to read through the translation and using comprehension questions. So basically, the main goals of all the person above is to make the translation as accurate, clear, and natural as possible.
Hi everyone, my name is Joe. Now I will talk about several ways of testing the translation. They are comparison with the source text, bad translation into the source language, comprehension test, naturalness test, readability test, and consistency test. First of all, I will discuss comparison with the source text. The purpose of the comparison is to check for equivalence of information contained. Comparison is a self-check. It is done by the translator or someone who knows both languages well and translation principle. The best way to do comparison is to have a draft of the translation, which is typed with double spacing and wide margins, so that ideas can be written in the margins and alternatives can be written about the line for later evaluation. In the example, you can see that the translation translate word by word, and therefore it is not equivalent with the source text. Next, for bad translation, Someone who makes a bad translation of the translated text into the source language is bilingual in the source and receiver language. This person tests the translation and writes out the meaning he gets from it back into the source language. He should do without having read the source text. The bad translation will let the translator know what is being communicated. Translating is different from bad translating. In translating, one uses natural and clear forms. In contrast, in bad translating, literal forms are used to show up structure of the translation being bad translated. A bad translation makes it possible for the translator and a consultant to make a careful comparison with the source text, looking for differences in meaning and for inadequate application of translation principles. It gives the consultant access to the translation. However, bad translation has some weakness. If the person who did the bad translation lacks fluency in one or the other of the language or become careless, the bad translation can be poor. Bad translation do not test naturalness. The translation may be less idiomatic than it seemed from the bad translation or more idiomatic. The bad translation focuses on meaning equivalence than naturalness. In the example, it was the first time he'd seen the boy smile in a long time. In translation, đã lâu lắm rồi anh mới thấy thằng bé mỉm cười. In bad translation, he hadn't seen the boy smile like this for a long time. Therefore, choosing a qualified bad translator is important. The third way to check a translation is comprehension test. Good comprehension testing is the key to a good translation. It is designed to find out what the translation is communicating to the audience for whom it is intended. Comprehension checks may be done by the translator himself or other persons who are fluent speakers of the receiver language. There should be ordinary people from various segments of the society, young, middle-aged, old, the more highly educated, or the newly literate. The first testing is overview. The respondent is asked to retell or give a summary of the material read. The purpose is to see if the main event line of the theme line is clear. The second step is to ask questions about the translated text. There are several kinds of questions, each with different purpose. Questions may be asked to give information about the discourse style, the theme, the text, and questions which have to do with the detail. Style questions are concerned with the genre and the style of the translation. The purpose is to see if the text is appropriately and skillfully taught. Questions may also be asked which are designed to evaluate the translation of the theme. These questions focus on the high points of the story and argument. The purpose is to determine if the main points of the meaning are clear in the translation. Detailed questions are questions about words, phrases, and other matters which the tester does not want to ask while he concentrating on the main points of the text. The answer to most detailed questions should be clearly found in the text, unless one is checking to see if implicit information is retrievable. Let me take some examples of three types of questions. For style question, these following questions are common, such as what kind of talk is this? Was the person who told this story young or woman or man? Do you think he tells stories very often? Or do you think he was talking to children or adults, men or women? Do you think he was in a hurry? Why? For both team questions and question with tricking details, I had the same sort of taste. Team tricking questions can be from this story. What can you tell me about the language situation long ago? Where did the people live? Where were their plans? And why did they want to do that? And questions where checking the details can be: where was the plane they settled in? What did the people make? What did they back them? And how did they hold the bridge together? Or what did they build in the city?
Hello everyone, my name is Hương and I will continue with the rest of our group's presentation. The fourth way of testing is naturalness test. The purpose of this test is to ensure that the form of the translation is natural and the style is appropriate. The ones who do naturalness tests are called reviewers. They should know enough about translation principles to understand idiomatic translation. They should also be looking for ways to improve the clarity, naturalness, flow of discourse, and the motive impacts on the readers. Now let's move on to the procedures of naturalness tests. First, reviewers read through the translation at one time while taking notes, in order to check the flow of the translation and the overall meaning of it. Then, to check accuracy, reviewers will compare the translation with the source text, looking for omissions, additions, or changes of meaning, and take notes. Now I'm going to show you an example of naturalness. I want to translate this sentence into Vietnamese. The publication of the pictures opened up a real Pandora's box. If the translator isn't familiar with idioms, he can translate the sentence into: việc công bố những bức ảnh đó đã mở ra một chiếc hộp Pandora. As you can see, the translation is not quite natural and clear. According to the freedictionary.com, to open a Pandora's box means to begin to introduce something that leads to the discovery or discussion of many other problems. Therefore, the sentence should be translated into: việc công bố những bức ảnh đó đã gây ra rất nhiều rắc rối mà lúc đầu người ta không ngờ tới. Next, I will move to the fifth way of testing, which is readability test. To carry out readability tests, testers ask someone to read a part of a translation aloud, preferably a complete section. Then, they should notice any places where the reader hesitates. They can look confused, reread the translation, or say something different. A text is readable because it has a pleasing style, a good rhythm, and moves along at an acceptable pace. It is necessary to note that what is readable for one audience may not be readable for another. So, readability tests should be done with ones who will be the users of the translation. Readability may also be affected by formatting matters such as font size, punctuation, spelling, size of margins, or space between lines. Let's take an extract from The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho as an example. The boy mumbled an answer that allowed him to avoid responding to her question. He was sure the girl would never understand. He went on telling stories about his travels. Some translators could translate the text into something like this. Cậu lẩm bẩm câu trả lời mà sẽ giúp cậu tránh được việc đáp lại câu hỏi của cô. Cậu chắc chắn rằng cô sẽ không bao giờ hiểu được. Cậu tiếp tục kể về những chuyến đi của mình. This translation is pretty much equivalent to the source text, but it is hard for readers to process. Another version from Văn học Publishing House, which I believe to be a better one. Cậu bối rối vì tin chắc rằng cô sẽ không hiểu nổi cậu. Để tránh né trả lời, cậu tiếp tục kể về hành trình của mình. In this translation, the translator rearranged the information so that readers can have a better understanding of the text. The last way of testing that I'm going to present is consistency checks. The first thing the checks do is to ensure the quality of the contents. If the document being translated is long and done over a long period of time, the translator has been inconsistent in the use of lexical equivalents for some key terms. Moreover, consistency checks are necessary in technical, political, or religious documents. The second thing consistency checks do is to look for technical errors. Translators could make some mistakes in the spelling of names of people and places, like borrow foreign words, capitals, and punctuation, such as question marks, commas, or brackets, the formatting of the text, and supplementary, for instance, footnotes, glossary, index, or table of contents. For example, the USA can be translated into both Hoa Kỳ and Mỹ in the entire text, which is not very consistent. Moreover, translator can translate điểm into all three words, like mark, grade, and score. Toán can be translated into mathematics and maths. Textbook can be translated into giáo trình and sách giáo khoa. Another criteria to note is bullet points, which can be inconsistent throughout a very long text. The last part of our presentation is using the test results. Translation testing should be used by the translator so the results won't be wasted. After all the tests have been carried out, the results will need to be evaluated. Unless there has been a careful system for recording the results, good ones will be lost. Thank you for your attention. Now let's move to the next activity.